Welcome to the Writer Talks. Nature, international music festivals, record-breaking ice skating rink. One place that houses all of this? The Canadian capital, Ottawa. Well, thanks to the writer-editor Renée Gendron, my guest today, I now know this. Like the city, she too is effortlessly bilingual. Renée specializes in romance and affirms that her novels comprise strong heroines, noble heroes, extra sizzle. With 3 upcoming works, Renée is a committed and focused writer. We sit down to discuss her soon-to-be published work from the Outdoorsman Series, the captivating story of James and Mirabelle, an adult romance with depth, mystery, intrigue, and most importantly, originality. It steers clear from the usual cliches and regular tropes. In fact, Renée's body of work includes historical romance and 7 Points of Contact. Another of her upcoming books is set in the backdrop of sports. Besides writing and editing, Renée is deeply interested in history, military history in particular, and loves to learn about quaint towns and their historical antecedents. Her fascination with squirrels is infectious, and she can talk at length about these clever, tenacious creatures. But before we dive in and listen to her, I would like to thank you, all my subscribers, for your continued support and urge you to bring in more people on board so that we can continue such rewarding engagements with brilliant writers from across the world. Please continue to like, share, and subscribe to the Writer Talks. I do hope you enjoy watching me talk to the very erudite and enchanting Canadian novelist Renée Gendron. Until next time, read, walk, observe, and smile. Ahoy! Ahoy! Welcome to the Writer Talks. Joining me from Ottawa, Canada is the talented writer-editor Renée Gendron. Ahoy, Renée!
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good, bonjour, and is it bon dimanche? Happy Sunday?
Yes. Oui.
Great. I hope I got your name right.
You did, thank you. Thank you very much.
Great. What is your typical Sunday like?
My typical Sunday is usually I wake up a little bit later because it's the weekend. I'll spend an hour or 2 in front of the computer, maybe get some words in, do some point form outlining of what needs to be done for the next scene or the next chapter. And if I don't do that, I'll probably review the previous chapter that I wrote the day before. I'll go on a walk. That can be up to 7-10 kilometers. I'll come home, have lunch, and then usually, if there's no chores around the house to do, I'll just go back to writing.
Lovely. Yeah. So your Sundays are very packed and very professional, actually.
I do my best to schedule time for writing. I am very serious about my craft. I understand I have a lot to learn and a lot to do. And so I do take a very structured approach to it.
That's lovely. That's lovely. Now, when I was reading up about you, I came across this statement and I'm quoting you. Strong heroines, noble heroes, extra sizzle. Would you like to elaborate on this?
So I write a range of romances, and I do my best to have heroines that have their own independent goals, their own resources, their own personal challenges that they develop and that they work on throughout whatever the short story is or the novella or the book. And my heroines always have backbone. They're not always hyper aggressive. They're not snarky. I don't like snarky characters personally, but they do stand up for themselves. They do learn. They do overcome. Noble heroes, my heroes that I write, they have a heart of gold. I don't like to write anti-heroes. I don't like to write villains turned male leads in a romance. I don't like that aspect. So my heroes have their own set of morals that they live by. They do have their own individual goals, and they are believable male characters who want to improve the lives of their families, the lives of in their community, and have a genuine, healthy relationship with the romantic heroine. And in the sizzle, I do write in the longer versions, the short stories, I just don't have enough word count for it. But in the novellas and in the books, the extra sizzle is because I write high heat. So there will be explicit sex in the longer works.
Absolutely, absolutely. Right. We will continue speaking more about your writing process, your interest in these genres of, historical fiction, military history, romance. But let's first dive into the rapid response section. I'm sure you know the drill with the rapid response, right?
Please do. Fire away.
Great. All right. So here's the first question. Between writing a romance and historical fiction, which do you think is harder and more challenging?
Both have their own challenges. With romance, you need to really understand the plot beats to be able to hit them well. And I think the challenge, and perhaps more challenging, is historical fiction. Readers of pure historical fiction are very knowledgeable about that time period. They have a very keen eye to pick up on missed details or on details that don't fit with that period. If you don't do if your book is exclusively historical fiction and you don't do the research on that time period, you'll lose readers. And because of the technical aspects and the historical context and making sure that you get everything from the dress to the food to how the castles or whatever was laid out to, if you're writing military, right, the actual course of the war and the course of the battle, if you're not getting those right, you're going to lose a lot of readers. So from the technical aspect, I do think that historical fiction is more challenging.
Fair enough, absolutely. And you're right about the kind of acumen readers of historical fiction do demonstrate. It's really, really astounding, actually. And I think they can give any historian a run for their money, right?
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. Now, if it was entirely up to you and you were able to break that one stereotype or debunk that one stereotype in romance, male heroes or happy endings, which of the two would you break or debunk?
For a book to be considered romance, it must have a happy for now ending or a happily ever after ending. Some writers will contest that. That's my understanding of romance, that the two romantic leads must end up together in a romantic relationship. As for male heroes, there's already been quite a bit of debunking of that. You have a lot of an emergence of LGBTQ plus romances, and in the last 10 years, there's also been an increase in polyamorous romances, in which there are a love triangle that stays as a romantic relationship, or more people involved in one romantic relationship. So I think both are being debunked, but I don't know how else to answer your question on that.
All right. I think in a way, you did. So I get that. Okay. Now, if you had the option to choose between your book being a Booker winner or a bestseller, what would you opt for?
I would go with bestseller.
All right. And why is that?
I think there's bestsellers that don't receive rewards, but are possibly as good, if not better, than the books that do receive rewards or recognition. And I think that you can be a bestseller in a very specific market and really understand that audience and really have a strong relationship with those readers. Whereas if you win an award, you don't necessarily have that same relationship with your audience and with your readers. And I think a lot of, so
that's a very interesting point. All right. Now, if you had the chance to meet either Jane Austen, Sarah McLean, or Nicholas Sparks, whom would you prefer to meet, and what is that one thing you would ask?
Meet Sarah McLean. I'm a huge fan of her work, and in particular her earlier works. And I would ask her, how does she write such witty dialogue? She, it's 10 ways of romancing a break, or romance, 10 letters to, okay, I'll have to come up with their first names, but she had her first trilogy. And I just found that dialogue between the characters so witty and so sharp, and it was very subtle. And I I would like to know her process to come up with the jokes, to come up with the tension that's built in, and how she maintains that tension throughout the entire book to keep those characters engaging. That
Right.
would be my question.
Wow, interesting. Okay. Now, if you were given the choice to be either one of these two characters, James or Mirabelle, characters from your upcoming novel, the Outdoorsman Series, Book 1, whom would you choose to be?
It might depend on the day. I think Mirabelle's work is more in line with what I do, but I do other things in real life, kind of like an office-based setting. Um, but James also does a lot of things outdoors. I'm
Right.
leaning more towards Mirabelle.
Okay, all right, yeah. I was truly impressed with Mirabelle. I really fell in love with this character. Okay, now between being an editor to your own books or editing others' works, which is more challenging and why?
I think editing my own work is more challenging because I don't pick up on my own mistakes.
Ah,
It's easier to find errors and issues and concerns in other people's works. However,
right,
in my own, I don't see my own flaws. I don't see the redundancy. I don't see the lack of pacing or tension, and so it's much harder for me to edit my own work.
right, right. Yeah, I think that's a that's a very valid thing. I do feel so. I share your view actually. Now, on a lighter vein, between a squirrel and a bird, who would you rather befriend?
Squirrel.
Why is that?
I would absolutely be a squirrel. The ability to jump and to always land on your feet. They're very curious. They have excellent memories, and they've got fun personalities. So squirrels, hand down.
Okay, great. This should be really, really easy, and it's the last question. Between French and English, which is the more romantic language?
I'll have to lean on French, and I say that in part because the language is a little bit more subtle, and just listening to it compared to English, there aren't as many hard sounds. So we've got like knock, for example, and a lot of
Correct.
K sounding sounds, and to my ear, that's very aggressive and harsh. Whereas you're not going to get that same kind of strong vowels that you would in French. In fact, a lot of them are actually silent, and because of that, there's a different melody to the language that I find is a little bit more pleasing or romantic to the ear.
Simply, right. Okay. Thank you so much for being such a sport. Now, continuing with that same idea of the squirrel, what is this fabulous fascination with squirrels? I think it was since the lockdown last year. I have these uh, three favorite squirrels that I have here, and I feed them nuts and fruits almost on a daily basis. And I enjoy watching them sun themselves. It's very relaxing. How did you get interested in squirrels?
Um, well, I spotted an injured squirrel about 7, 8 years ago, and this animal was very injured, and I wasn't in a position to be able to capture it to bring it to a vet or a rehab shelter. So I left some food outside for the animal and some water. I saw it a second time and I left more food out for it, but I didn't see it a third time. However, in the interim between the two sightings, I was leaving food out, and other squirrels, being squirrels and intelligent and curious animals they are, picked up on this and started picking up the food, and it just evolved from there that these squirrels kept coming by. They have a very good sense of timing. Animals have their own understanding of time. When I put out food at breakfast, they always kind of happened to be waiting there, no reason, just kind of knew when breakfast was. And then when I put food out around dinner, for some reason, all the squirrels were like, yeah, I'll just loiter around here and wait for the peanuts. Okay, and it became just a habit. Things ebb and flow. Animals change territories. Other animals move into other people's territories. And now I've got a regular chipmunk that comes up to the door for breakfast and dinner. and then takes peanuts from my hand, and that's the rhythm. And there are still some squirrels that come by. Yeah, squirrels are just wonderfully creative. They always figure things out. And if you don't believe me, ask someone who loves to bird watch and has a bird feeder in their backyard, and they try their hardest to keep that bird feeder for birds, and the squirrels still get to it. Right? They still get to it. And they get to it because they actually are very intelligent. And you can look up some videos on YouTube where people build, they're like obstacle courses for squirrels. Then they go, like, how do you climb a slinky? And then how do you cross this bar? And then you need to push a button to open a box. And once you open the box, there's peanuts. And they have all these obstacle courses, and they're all quite intricate. And the squirrels figure things out within a day or two.
Amazing. Absolutely.
That's the love of squirrels.
Fair enough. Now, would you describe yourself as an outdoor person, or do you prefer being inside a comfortable room in your favorite corner? Which one serves to inspire you to write?
I take a lot of outdoor walks.
Right.
I suppose like indoor walks in like a sports dome or something. And I'm not an avid hiker, but I'm outside walking along. And I find there's a rhythm to walking, and it helps turn off the brain, and you can just let thoughts float into your brain, float out, ebb and flow. Sometimes those thoughts become the idea of a scene or the idea of a book, and outdoors is really depending on what you want me to do. I'm not going to, for example, just sit on the patio just for the sake of sitting on the patio, and I'm not necessarily going to go biking for 100 kilometers for different reasons. So it depends, right? I can do walks, and that's nice. I can do walks in forests, that's even better. But I don't necessarily spend all of my weekend outdoors for the sake of being outdoors. Yeah, so I guess I'm more of an indoors person overall.
Right. Okay. Now, let's discuss a little more about your upcoming book, Book One from the Outdoorsman series. Who or what was the inspiration behind Mirabelle? She's such a unique character in terms of what she does and how she conducts herself. Absolutely intriguing.
I strive to create unique characters for every book, and even with my fantasy and my historical fiction, I do try to have different professions in order to explore that profession and see how it impacts character development. Every kind of profession has its own path to reaching where you are, education, network, if you had to do an apprenticeship or something, and that influences your overall character. And if I vary the professions, well, then hopefully I'll get more interesting characters. I don't always want to read about fill in the blank, right? There's always going to be standard professions depending on which genre you're writing. And that's great. Some of these books are brilliant. And I find that I make it intentional to vary the professions to be able to see what I can play around with. Her inspiration, she developed mostly out of her career. I gave her a career, and I gave her two particular deep hurts that she had to overcome in order to resolve her internal conflict to be with James. And I played around with, here's her profession, what kind of conflicts does she get, what kind of obstacles and challenges, and then here's her past, her romantic past, and how does that influence her profession, her career choices, and how do her career choices impact the kinds of romantic relationships she's had. There's a push-pull there. And I played around with that, and she just snowflaked out, as it were. She just emerged from that as a series of conflicts and tension.
Very, very interesting, actually, and probably that's what adds to the allure of Mirabelle. She's tough, and at the same time, as you said, not overbearing. She's just tough, but she's not overbearing.
Yep.
Now, the other aspect I really admired or appreciated was the opening to this story. It was almost like reading a detective fiction with the killing of the three Moors and the riveting, quick discussions between James and his officer. How did you consider the Moors, and what made you explore a subject like poaching?
For me, I try, like, I do strive to create original stories. I try. Sometimes I fail, but there's effort. And one of my processes in terms of finding an original mystery is I had to look at which city I was basing them in. So it's Kingston, Ontario, which is just on the St. Lawrence River, and it's got about 120,000 population. There's certain geographic constraints there, and I wanted to base the book in that city, period. And I wanted him to be a game warden because it's an interesting profession. There's a lot of firefighters, there's a lot of police officers, there's a lot of other first responder type books and heroines as well. I felt, no, I'm going to make him a game warden. So what kind of problems does a game warden in the Kingston area face? And I figured poaching was one of these crimes that's quite extensive. There's a lot of money involved in poaching at high level, especially for pelts and furs. And I thought, well, that would be just a different crime to explore and to see how else that could tie into Mirabelle's work and Kingston and James as a person and as a character, how that would fit or not for him.
Very interesting again. Right. Now, what was the reason behind the choice of your protagonist, both being 40 plus? Normally in romance, we come across younger people. Now, I could immediately see that this affords a greater depth and a greater freshness to both the characters as well as to the story, needlessly. Needless to say. Particularly the realistic interactions between James and Mirabelle in the coffee shops, steering very clear from the mushy romance.
Well, again, I try to write different characters, period, and I also I write a lot of books. Some of them aren't published yet, but I write a lot of books. For example, I've got a fantasy series that's 29 books long. And I made a conscious effort in that series to have your typical 20-something romance and then your typical 30-something romance. But I also focus on some older characters who are in their 60s because they also have romantic relationships. So it's a complete community. And that's a common concern for many readers of romance is even though the whole age spectrum of readers read romance, most of the works, regardless of Western or contemporary or fantasy romance, pick the romance, they tend to focus on very young characters, 18, 19, 20, or maybe 31, 32.
True.
I thought it would be interesting to explore a romantic relationship with people who are, on the whole, emotionally mature. They've got 20, 25 years of romantic baggage, as it were, that they also need to filter and process in order to have and embrace a new romantic relationship. And I also found that because of their emotional maturity, the kinds of conflicts they experience between them are also expressed in a different way. And personally speaking, there's a different maturity of perspective from these two characters, and as they're trying to figure out what this relationship is it romantic, is it not, and where it goes. And that I found quite interesting to write, and I hope that readers will also appreciate that mature people can also have romantic relationships with the full kind of emotional depth, that perhaps even deeper, that a 20-year-old or something might experience.
Absolutely. The kind of passion that can be possible between younger people is equally, absolutely, it's equally possible. Could I request you to please read from your favorite section of this novel?
Absolutely. So I will just get here. I do have two sections that I can read from. One that will be from the actual romance section, and then one will be from the mystery section.
Great.
And in my books, I strive to have 50% romance and 50% non-romance. In this case, it's a mystery, so 50% mystery. And this is a contemporary romance, and I understand that authors have some liberty to pair people up, and even though one person or two might not actually have to do that job. James is actually a game warden in Canada in contemporary setting, so it's 2021 now.
Right.
There are certain things in his profession that he can't bring in a civilian. Like, she can't follow him to a crime scene kind of thing, because that's not the rules, right? That's not the law. So there's a little bit of distance between them and the mysteries, but there are connections between her work and the mystery that tie them together on that level. Okay. I will read. Do you have a woman with an appealing curve of her waist and curls of brown hair teasing her neck addressed the clerk. Coffee, a lemon and cranberry muffin, and a $10 gift card, please. Her light French accent tickled his ear. The clerk gathered her order and placed it on the counter. Fumbling her beach bag-sized purse, she paid with cash and placed the gift card on the counter before moving over so James could be served. Her slender fingers were bare of rings. "What can I get you?" the pimply-faced clerk asked him. Ignoring the clerk's question, he collected the gift card and held it out to her. "Ma'am, you forgot this." Brown eyes met his. Keep it here in case a homeless person or someone who's short of money would like something to eat. Her bow-shaped lips curved in a luminous smile that lit up her face. Then she spun around and headed to a table. The air thickened, and he followed the gentle sway of his hips with his eyes. The sway of his hips memorized them. Slow, not showy, very feminine. More of a sachet than a walk. A rhythm that beckons sailors to sail into storms and walk off the edge of the world. "Sir?" The clerk slid the gift card on the counter next to the pastry tray and looked at James. She settled in a corner booth and removed some papers from her purse. Hair gathered in a loose bun, she speared it with a pen. Locks tumbled free and framed her face in a way that made her effortlessly beautiful. "Sir?" James cleared his throat, ordered a coffee and an eclair, and stepped out of the way for the next customer. Summoning the boldness he had when he was 20, he strode to the table. "May I?" He placed a hand on the back of the chair opposite her. "Please take the chair." Her eyes met his for the briefest of instants before she returned to her work. "May I sit?" His tongue doubled in thickness. Eyebrows arched, she eyed the empty table to her left and to her right. Dark brown eyes looked at him, assessing him. She ran her index finger along the thumbnail in slow circles. An eternity passed before her cheeks curved in a fraction of an inch. Not a full smile, but an open one masked in shyness. She motioned for him to sit. "Please." Pulse pounding, he lowered himself to the chair. A Government of Canada header poked out from under paperwork. "Are you a government person?" Cavemen had better openers. I bludgeoned a saber-toothed tiger today. Do you want to see the tooth on my necklace? "I'm a private sector person." "You?" "Government." He drew another sip, having long forgotten how to play cool. "Are you a married person?" She laughed, a rich, smooth laugh that massaged his soul. "No." Her full lips twisted at the corners. "Are you?" The last time he was in this situation, what did he say? Right. Why did the Tyrannosaurus Rex cross the road? "Do you do that often?" he asked. "Leave gift cards for the homeless?" "Not every time I buy coffee, but often enough." She ran her thumb over her ballpoint pen. A tentative pause hung between them. An opening. "James." He stopped himself from reaching his hand out by reaching for his coffee. "Mirabelle, like the airport." That was Mirabelle in Montreal. The airport has one E and one L. My name has two L's and one E. The smile crossed her lips, but her eyes filled with doubt. "That airport hasn't been used for decades. I don't travel much." He shrugged. "How about the basics?" "Basics." James, actor, 50, widowed, 4 adult children, cop, 3 younger brothers, owner dog. "Sorry to hear about your wife. How long are you married?" 22 years. He sipped his coffee to hide his frown. "How'd she die?" "Breast cancer." "That's awful. How long? How long ago?" 5 years. He stared out the window at the half-empty parking lot. "How long were you married?" 22 years. That's a long time. She pinched her lower lip, her dark honey eyes locked on his. He inclined his head, then arched his eyebrows in silence. Your turn. Direct and to the point. That smile again, sweet and straightforward and utterly kissable. Mirabelle Bisset. 45, divorced once, no children, no pets. One half brother, one half sister, both younger. Owner of a translator company. All right, and it goes on.
Fantastic, and it's really good. As I said, it's so original. That's what I really loved, and I think it's her kind gesture that caught his attention.
Yeah.
Leaving out a gift card for a needy person, and I think that was really a nice gesture. No, and again, continuing with the same novel, the dialogues also are very fresh, very realistic, and so also is your depiction of the setting. The manner in which you introduce the element of mystery with reference to the Chinese matches, for example. Have you actually visited these kind of log cabins or watched officers at work to bring in this kind of credibility?
I have spoken with some people who do work criminal investigations in some capacity, and I myself am not involved in any way in law enforcement, and this is not a procedural. Do not think that this book is a police procedural in Canada. It is not. It is a mystery. But I do have some technical experts that revise, at least for the larger parameters, on what kind of things would be investigated and how they would be investigated, and a little bit more on the actual legal process in Canada. We have a different kind of investigatory process because it's a different country, and I put that in the disclaimer of people.
Right.
But yeah, there's technical advice, but this is not a police procedural.
Right, right. And so when will the book be published?
I am looking at a publication date sometime in the first 2 weeks of October 2021. It depends on how fast I can get the book covered and then get the binding. This is in the last review of proofreading.
Right.
That should be done and turned around by the second week of September. And then that gives me a month to put things up on Amazon, to put things up on Kobo and what have you, and take it from there.
Right, fair enough, fair enough. Shall eagerly look forward to reading that then.
Thank you.
Now, I can see, as we were talking about it earlier as well, that your primary interest is in romance, and In the Red Room is a historical romance. The Star-Crossed is a romance science fiction, and among your upcoming books, as I read, Jaded Hearts and 7 Points of Contact, they are also romance novels. Would you like to talk about these two upcoming books as well, Jaded Hearts and 7 Points of Contact? I think 7 Points of Contact is set in the backdrop of sports, whereas Jaded Hearts is set in the prairies. That's what I read.
I made the decision to try to venture out to different genres. I wrote so much fantasy for so long, my brain broke, and I decided James and Mirabelle was actually my first contemporary that I tried, and then I realized I can actually write dialogue. So hey, all right, so I can actually write dialogue, and that can actually be funny. So that was a bonus, and from there I decided to write my first historical Western romance, and that's Jaded Hearts. It's written. It needs 1 or 2 more edits, but that's going to be published in winter of 2022, but I have it. It's about 40,000, 45,000 words. That is the first book of the Mines and Metals series, and it's about the procession of settlers, I guess, from Eastern Canada to Western Canada in Alberta. There's a small town, and in this small town there's a diversity of people that are trying to make a living, and there's interactions with all sorts of interesting professions and as things get organized. And this first Jaded Hearts is a historical Western between a woman who has to defend her family. She also has a unique profession that she's I don't know if I want to give too much away, but she's a prospector, and she needs to find a mine that her father found, like left a map for her to find, and she needs to defend her mother and daughter, or sister, pardon me. And then she meets another fellow who is trying to find respectability in this town. He's been very burned by a past love before, and now he wants to rebuild and to establish himself as a credible merchant. So that's a little bit the premise, and it's the first book of the series. It's set in about 1880 Alberta, and it's Jaded Hearts, and it's my first Western, and I think it works well. The 7 Points of Contact is a novella that is a contemporary sports novella. That one centers also around Kingston, and it's a man returning home to take care of his father who has cancer, and it's a woman finding enough courage to leave the messiness of a divorce and of an ex-husband who's always chasing her, and trying to reestablish her life and work towards a promotion and find enough satisfaction and courage to really kind of take the leads of her life again. The sports part comes of it, where she plays softball, and the hero, Jonas, is informally coaching her on softball and helping her lead the team and helping her understand that she's such a leader on the field that there's no reason why she can't take those same skill sets and also apply it in her career. That one is written. I need a cover, but it's good to go, and it depends on when James and Mirabelle's story drops. So that's October, and usually it's a 2 to 3 month spacing between releases to not burn out audiences, right? So winter, probably December 2021, January 2022. 7 Points of Contact is released. That's good to go as soon as I get the cover. And then Jaded Hearts will probably be released March, I guess, would be the next kind of cycle. I'm already writing for 2022, and I think I can release 4 books a year. And then once I get enough of a backlog of good to go books, then I might increase my release schedule and just maintain that. But Star-Crossed, In the Red Room, Beneath the Twin Suns, and Heads or Tails, those are all anthologies. And those anthologies are actually all based by other Twitter writers.
Right.
So it's just kind of interesting. There's a little bit of fantasy and historical fiction in Beneath the Twin Suns. In the Red Room is all mysteries and romances, but different genres. And then Heads and Tails is supernatural romance. Right. So it's an interesting kind of mix of what we can put together. Yeah.
That's lovely. So do you work concurrently on your books, given that you're aiming at, or you're able to bring in 4 books in a year, you're able to publish 4 books in a year. Do you write concurrently? How do you manage?
My brain broke, and I tried to do a lot of things concurrently. I can't do it. I don't know. I respect authors who can do it. I cannot. I strive to finish one project, at least the draft, and then once that project is done, I move on to another. I can't. I just can't hop it. I can't do it. I can't even edit other people's work while I'm working on one work in progress. Right. What I do, though, is I do extensively plot. I am surrounded by notebooks, and it must be this series of notebooks, otherwise I can't handle it. But I've got a whole closet full of these. It's a series of notebooks. I have bought out dollar stores buying these books, right? It's all this. I am surrounded by notebooks, right? In the closet.
Very colorful ones.
But every color, I guess, of notebook is one particular genre. So
Ah,
I know when
okay.
I'm picking up, I know what I'm getting, and then I've got my brilliant cat scratches that I call writing, and I keep track of it. And then, especially for the longer series, I create tables in Microsoft Word where book one is these characters with this romance trope with this kind of mystery, and then I have 2-3 point forms of what that is, and I make sure that within the series I don't repeat the tropes.
Right, right.
Right? And that way, at least within the series, it's some readers don't hop genres, right? They only read contemporary, they only read Western, what have you. And I keep track of their professions as well. And that way, when I plot out the entire series, I know that every book on paper is fresh.
Right,
And
right.
yeah, that's really nice. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Sounds again really really unique approach. That it's always nice to talk to writers about your writing process, and you get so many different ideas, and there are such multiple approaches to this whole process. Now, you're also besides being a writer, you're also a beta reader and a structural editor, and you interview authors yourself. Now, how does it feel to be on the other side?
It's fun being interviewed, and I'm very grateful, Asha, for the opportunity. Yeah, well, it's interesting. There's a little bit of a hiatus right now for Amuse-Bouche Review's YouTube channel. There's been a lot of structural changes on the background, and I think the second year of COVID is also taking a toll on quite a few of us. So the Amuse-Bouche Review is still active. The newsletter still goes out. It's just the YouTube channel has been on hold for a little bit. But yeah. So
Right, right. Now, what inspired you to don the hat of an editor as well? I mean, and what exactly is the most challenging part of being an editor? Because we all know as writers, we're very possessed and attached with our work. How do you convince a reluctant writer to take your suggestions?
I do structural edits. I don't do line edits. I don't do copy edits. I
Right,
do it freelance, and
right,
I think one of the biggest challenges for writers is to understand that you're writing a book, you're not putting together a movie. And there are two different ways to approach writing a movie or filming a movie and writing a book. And you can do a lot of things in the visual realm that you can't do on the page in words. And to understand that when you receive feedback, especially from an editor, it is well intentioned. That person wants to help you create the best book possible. And when you're looking on structural issues, people might say, well, the prose is great, but the plot doesn't make sense, or there are too many plot holes with it.
right.
And it can be quite hard to take because you spent however many hours, maybe even years, putting
Right.
this piece together, a short story or a whole 100,000-word book. And it takes a lot of effort just to put that together.
True.
To say that it's not 80% or 90% done can be quite a devastating thing.
Absolutely.
And another challenge is to understand that when you're looking at the pacing and the tension, a lot of times there's no conflict on the page. There's no obstacle for the person to overcome. And if the obstacle isn't up to the task, up to the skill level of the character, there's no tension, and then the reader gets disengaged because the character isn't struggling.
True.
So how do I do it? How do I suggest? I make polite suggestions. And then I provide resources where the person might be able to improve this aspect or gain inspiration for that, or research how other authors have done it in order to see if they can take some lessons learned, some principles for them to apply in their own work. But
Right.
ultimately, the decision it rests always with the author. And if the author chooses not to, that's entirely their choice.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Right. Now, what has been the best compliment so far, both as a writer and as an editor?
As an editor, I think the best compliment has been, it's really, my comments and suggestions have really taken their craft to the next level. Always a bonus to receive that. And so far, the best compliment I've received is that at least the dialogue is funny, or the joke I want to land makes them laugh. Not like hee hee, but like burst out laughing. So like, okay, I can do this.
They are witty, absolutely. I think even I mentioned that I found your dialogues really, really intriguing. I think that was one of the huge click points for me when I read your book. Now, what is the one special or unique thing about Ottawa? Canada, of course, is a beautiful place and definitely has one of the best looking heads of state, Justin Trudeau. But what is the one unique thing about Ottawa?
I think one of the unique things about Ottawa is that it was actually the place where the origins of the Industrial Revolution in Canada started. And a lot of people don't recognize this, but the Ottawa River has a series of falls that were used to generate electricity and propel a lot of the industrial base in the early period. So 1820, 1860, somewhere in there in Canada. We're a young country, right? But there was a lot of innovation and industry based in Ottawa, and Ottawa itself was at the leading edge of industrial production because of that. And I find that kind of history gets overlooked, and it would, yeah. So I think that's quite an interesting spot, a tidbit to know about Ottawa.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It is very interesting. Now, what would your one advice be to romance writers, considering it's such a popular genre?
My advice would be, don't be afraid to have a stronger non-romance plot. A lot of romance writers focus exclusively on the relationship to the point where the characters ruminate, to the point where they disengage the reader. Oh, I wonder what she's doing. Oh, I wonder what he's doing. Give them something constructive to do independent of the romance, and you'd be surprised what kind of sparks can fly between the characters. That would be my advice.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great suggestion. Now, any special message to viewers of the Writer Talks?
I just want to say thank you so much. I'm grateful for your time and for your attention. And you have a terrific hostess in Asha. So give her all the wonderful support that you're able to. And thank you. I'm very grateful.
Thank you so much, and all the very best to you for all your upcoming projects. And I'm sure they'll do really, really well. Good luck with that.
Thank you, Asha. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, and au revoir, is it?
Oui, au revoir. Merci.